True crime community, trending, viral. Another phenomenal guest with William Steele. Welcome to William Steele, True Crime. Thank you for joining my True Crime channel and podcast if you're listening in. And thank you to all the fans that I've developed through my participation in the docuseries Inmate to Roommate on A&E Network. Thank you, A&E Network and Sharp Entertainment, for including me in this journey. Also, I would like anybody who's new to this to please hit like and subscribe. I'm still trying to build my numbers up, and hopefully you guys will join me in this journey post-incarceration to tell crime victim stories, inspirational stories of men that were released from prison and turned their life around. They're writing books now. They're doing good things. And we have a whole bunch of different stories. You know, we have reformed gangsters. We have law enforcement. We have an ATF agent, retired, Ignacio Esteban, that comes on here regularly. And so we always try to look for very special guests with an insider's perspective on things with a good outlook. And so I'll introduce my current guest now. Laura Leone Culio is my current guest. Now, let me tell you a little something about Laura. My recollection is she was a fan of Inmate to Roommate. She looked my stuff up. Well, we got in touch. She purchased both of my books. Thank you very much, Laura. And it come to find out, so she has a very, very special career and background and credentials. Now, she's formerly at the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is the federal prosecutor's office in California. I'll leave it to her if she wants to say exactly where. But so in California, she was part of the federal prosecutor's office. She was in with the civil financial litigation section. She was an investigative analyst, and she's also a certified fraud examiner, which my fiance, Dr. Mary Bass, is as well. And my fiance is an accountant and a forensic accountant. So Laura has very similar credentials, and she has an MBA, an MA, a BSB. I guess that's in accounting, and she's an Air Force veteran. So she's done a lot, you know, for the public good and for other people. And I'm just thrilled to have her as a fan. And, you know, that she bought my books. I ask everybody else, please check out my books too, because that's how I'm trying to earn an honest living these days and telling these stories. So with that, I introduce Laura Leone Culio on camera with me now. Thank you for joining us, Laura.
Thanks for having me, Bill. And yes, that's right. I did buy both of your books, and I'm a big fan. I watched your show, and, you know, I really love true crime. And, you know, that's obviously why I have that background. I fell in love with, you know, I used to binge watch Law and Order back in the 90s and kind of just, you know, fell in love with that, and actually ended up getting an accounting degree and doing some tax auditing, and then jumped over to the DOJ side about 11 years ago. And, you know, as far as being a victim advocate, I just want to thank you for doing that, because that's not an easy job, and it's not easy to, you know, be a platform and, you know, give basically a place for these victims to speak and to get their stories out in, you know, in the public, because a lot of times they kind of maybe get a shot in court to kind of, you know, tell their side of it. And that's if they have the money to, you know, go there and travel and, you know, follow it and all that. So I just want to thank you for doing this, because it means a lot to these victims. And, you know, so I really appreciate that. And
I appreciate you're recognizing that. You know, with my background, you know, I served 18 years for nonviolent crimes, and you know, I really always had a heart for victims, because my mother was mentally ill, and all through my childhood, you know, her being picked on and, you know, bullied around here and there, and, you know, abused various places, I would be always the person standing up for her. So it was ingrained to me to stand up for others, even though I went bad myself for a while because I developed a cocaine addiction. You know, it didn't change the heart I had inside behind all that. So I thank you for recognizing that. And, you know, I'd like you to really start this off, if you could, by telling us a little more about yourself, maybe your background, where you're from originally. You know, when you were a child, did you always want to be an accountant? Did you love math when you were a little kid? You know, how does somebody come to love math? Personally, I could barely count and add. You know, I'm good at making money. I'm horrible at keeping track of it. My fiance Mary, she's wonderful at all that. You know, and so tell me about you. You know, did you love accounting and math when you were a kid?
not necessarily, but, you know, my dad was an accountant, tax auditor, and he did audits with the state, anything from, sales tax to, fuel tax, any kind of business taxes. And I kind of just followed in his footsteps. I guess, math came easy to me. And I just said, you know what? My dad kind of always had that kind of accounting job, and I know I can do it. Let me try it out. And so after I got out of the Air Force, I had my bachelor's in accounting, and started with the tax accounting, and kind of just went from there, and really grew to have a fondness and love for the DOJ and the DOJ mission, and kind of got in as a civil investigator, because a lot of people know about the agents with the guns and the criminal, and the FBI and agencies would bring us the evidence, and we had U.S. Marshals and things like that, and they would go seize assets and evidence. But I'm more like like how you said, forensic accountant, like person behind the person, and basically collecting judgments and criminal restitution, fines, anything that is owed to either a victim or the government. And a victim can be individuals, it can be businesses, it can be state agencies, other federal agencies, and there's an array of cases from blue collar to white collar. So I don't know where your focus is, but I can talk about either of them. Anything from drugs to predators to tax fraud, and Ponzi schemes.
Well, we're gonna get into that, because my true crime audience, most of them are aware that it was the taxes and the books and everything that brought Al Capone down. So
yes,
you're the person a criminal needs to fear when it comes to their money and their assets, and getting the ill-gotten gains seized back. So let me ask you this. I know Mary's a forensic accountant. I don't see that on the bio. Is that you said you would like one, or you actually certified as a forensic accountant somewhere?
No, I'm not. No, I'm only certified as a fraud examiner, but I do a lot of basically, investigative forensic type work. So
forensic type work. Okay, so it's a similar thing. All right. Get into some of the cases. I know, in getting to know you over the last few months, you actually had cases, pretty big cases that people would know, that were profiled on American Greed. It was a pretty popular show about crime. And so you're behind some of these cases, and I think you were interviewed for them, where your cases were included on them. Tell us, pick like one or two cases and let us know something that you've actually worked on that people might know or could look up.
Yeah, so one big one that is somewhat recent is actually the Wanakawati case, and it's a very long name, but I'm going to read it off here. WANNAKUWATTE, Wanakawati. And Mr. Wanakawati, from roughly 2002 to 2014, had 200 individual victims. And so this is the highest priority in, cases and collections and things like that. And it was really, really odd, because he actually overstated his income. And we're talking 230 million here. So this is a very large, amount.
Right.
And he even overstated his income, in fact, so much that he overstated it on the taxes too. So, because he wanted to look very profitable, to get these people to, invest in his company, invest in his business. And he took, it wasn't publicly traded. So, it's a non-publicly traded small business. And so he cooked the books so extremely that it was kind of weird, because he actually overstated his income, and so way overstated by multi-million dollars in multiple years. Generally what they'll do is they'll understate it on the tax side and pay way less taxes, or get a huge tax refund, and then overstate it everywhere else, in their profit and loss statement.
It sounds like you were trying to almost unwittingly or wittingly co-opt the IRS to underwrite his scams, by saying, well, look, right, what I've, made.
Exactly. So
meanwhile, it triggers a million red flags. Like, what the hell?
Yeah. So the question is, so it's kind of weird, because in that kind of situation, instead of getting a huge tax refund, he would actually be overpaying, which is really weird, but it's still incorrect. It's still the incorrect amount reported, whether you're getting money back or you owe taxes, doesn't matter. And so in in 5 years of doing tax audits, actually 6.5, but and then 11 years of doing this work, financial collections. I had never heard of or seen anyone that is overstated, especially that much money. Generally they will lie on a loan application to the bank, to kind of like overstate. I make 10,000 a month in my business instead of 2,000. Generally that's where they'll cook the books because it's kind of informal, and it helps them get loans they're basically not supposed to get.
Now when they do that, does the bank, if they catch it before they issue a loan, are they obligated to turn it over to you guys, or does it just say no and don't come back again? Are the banks turning these things over to the government to investigate? Like, this is not true. We found out on our own. This is not accurate.
Yeah, they're supposed to, because there are task force that look for these kind of anomalies. So part of that would be working with the banks or the credit unions, and they have filing requirements under the Bank Secrecy Act. I just have to say I'm not an attorney, but I know that's under Title 31. And under Title 31, the Bank Secrecy Act creates a lot of information sharing and, task force things that we can, basically information that we can access. And that if they, they literally need a phone line to call someone at the feds, hey, this person looks like they're doing money laundering and huge tax fraud. Like Wanakawati maybe would have had 300 bank accounts with all kinds of crazy transactions. Like that's really obvious, but I'm just giving an example. They would literally have a phone line or a phone contact, like on a task force, so-and-so at FBI, so-and-so at U.S. attorneys, so-and-so at, Superior Court, things like that, white collar, task force, or blue collar task force, child predator task force. Kind of just depends on the category. DEA, drugs, but drug cases might also be, other things, or it might be white collar and blue collar. So
every bank branch would have, or their supervisory, office, regional office would have a direct number to the exact task force that investigates that crime and say, hey, we have another one, check it out. How does that come into play? Now, we'll get back to Wanakawati in a minute. On SARS, suspicious activity report, that's the $10,000 thing you always hear about.
Mm-hmm.
Does that concern you guys at all, or is that something?
Yeah, that's part of that. That's part of that. So those reporting requirements by financial institutions are part of that Title 31, the Bank Secrecy Act. So they have to have, like, there's certain requirements that financial institutions, which I say financial institutions in quotes, because if you buy a car with cash at a car dealer, that's considered a financial institution under the Bank Secrecy Act, because you're, triggering a certain amount, or cash equivalents, like a cashier's check, for example, or a money order. And so if I walk in with 20,000 in the car dealer and say, I want to buy this with cash, 20,000, there's going to be some kind of form that should be triggered by that, good or bad. It might be a criminal, using like a Wanakawati type, using, money that doesn't belong to them from victims that they stole, and they're going to buy, a car in cash. So it needs to be flagged. It might be total legitimate. And, I saved this up in my savings for 10 years and that's my money, or an inheritance. So, right. But, so that's why I say financial institutions. Most time it is banks or cash checking places. Not always, can be car dealers. But yes, this all falls under the Bank Secrecy Act, that Title 31. And they also are required, especially banks, to have an anti-money laundering section, that actually, administers this. And if the feds or state, task force call and need information, they are limited to what they can hand out without a subpoena. But there's generally a little bit of information sharing and, an analytical sharing that we can do. But obviously we have to get a subpoena if we need, like, full-blown records, or, right. Like if we need a video of the person coming in the bank, or, something like that.
Now, years ago, I remember, like 70s, 80s, 60s, I guess, there was a lot of, like, this offshore hiding of assets to hide it from the IRS. You used to be an IRS agent, I believe, right? A revenue agent?
Yes, revenue agent, civil. Yeah.
Right. So they would put all their assets, like in Isle of Man, Liechtenstein, the Canary Islands. A lot of these refuges, I think, were closed down. Are there places that people today are still trying to hide their money that is not subject to, United States interdicting their money?
Yeah. Like well, back when I was IRS back in, I don't know, 2012 or earlier, there was a big thing with the UBS bank accounts, in Sweden.
I remember that.
And yeah, and I wasn't involved in that. I think the large business section and criminal were more involved in that, but I did hear about it. And um, there's something called there's an information sharing with international. It's called MLAT. Um, I I got some of this from teaching with money laundering and stuff, but so that's a multilateral agreement treaty, I believe, MLAT, MLAT. And so there's certain countries that are a little more friendly and that will do information sharing or freeze accounts for us. So if we have someone that did a horrific Ponzi scheme and they have multiple accounts in Thailand and some in somewhere in Europe and some, one country might not work with us and cooperate as much, but another country might be a little more friendly and be like, yeah, you know what, we're going to freeze that account. You have evidence that this is a criminal, that these are proceeds, meaning criminal proceeds from, victims of a crime. And we're going to not only freeze the account, we're going to turn over the money. And so what these, multilateral treaty agreements allow us to do is to use, the legal means to get the information about those accounts and to hopefully recover some money for victims, more importantly. So, some countries obviously are more hostile than others with the U.S. So, one country we might not recover anything. Other countries, they might cooperate with us and we might recover, all the bank accounts. It just depends on that,
And there's
that agreement.
There's some countries that are not even signatories to the NLAT agreements, right? They don't
Correct.
have to.
Correct. Yeah. There's some that won't even, that are like U.S. subpoena, forget it. Even if it's grand jury, for criminal,
Right.
they won't even, they'll just ignore it or whatever,
you know my background. I was a jewel and art thief, and we moved a lot of cocaine back in the 80s. And I never did believe in putting anything in the bank. It was always in jewelry, gold coins, cash, and I know even the guys that were way bigger than me, like in that period, the Colombians and some of the Colombians I work with, they would have millions and tens of millions of dollars stashed, buy a nice home in South Florida, rip out the walls, install the cash plastic inside the walls. And to this day, they'll occasionally buy or renovate a house with a trafficker. He's been incarcerated or dead for years and never told anybody was there. And they'll go do some renovating and they're pulling out, to this day, they're pulling out bags and bags of money out of walls, dated to the 80s. So it's just hard to keep track of all of it. But I think the wisest thing, and again, this channel is an inspirational channel. Nobody's trying to teach anybody how to commit a crime. But in my case, I was a firm believer in gold, precious metals, cash. What are you hearing about them moving over to getting away from this paper currency and moving to digital? Everybody says, I don't know if it's a conspiracy, people online, or if there's any truth to this. It seems almost scary that at the drop of a hat, China or an adversary or even the United States can shut down your internet, your social media, your bank account, and leave you with change in your pocket, like in a split second. And now if you don't even have there's going to be a requirement for no more cash, perhaps. This is I'm hearing this. I'm not reporting this. Is there any truth to something like that trying to get rolled out?
Yeah, they started training, at least me, I don't know, about 5 years ago on like Bitcoin and all that because the U.S. Marshals were seizing it, and warrants. And, maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10 years ago, somewhere in there. And it's an asset that we took custody of that we had to basically resell if it was an asset that we could, financially get something for the victims and then pay off the victims after those assets were sold. So we had to learn about it. And actually we had a big takedown of a dark web case, one of the biggest dark web cases. I'm trying to remember the name. If I do a quick Google search, California Eastern District dark web.
Was it Silk Road?
What's it called? Silk Road?
Silk Road. I think that's the one they were selling a lot of.
Yeah, it might have been that one. But yeah, so we had, criminal prosecutors that specialize in the dark web, anything you think of from, child porn, all that, drugs, anything and everything, pills, oxy, everything. And so I think it came up a lot in cases like that and a lot of drug cases, but I didn't even know there were Bitcoin ATMs until I saw a case where we actually froze a guy who was within our district who, he had ill-gotten, illicit, criminal gains, and he was running them through, I guess, Bitcoin ATMs. Apparently, there's a real ATM you can go to, and this was like 4 or 5 years ago. Like, I was shocked. I'm like, I didn't even know there was a Bitcoin ATM.
I got out of prison, and on the way driving back from the prison I was in to Indiana, where we filmed the TV show, Inmate to Roommate, we stopped off at a convenience store, and there was one of those machines in there, and I was like, I kind of heard of Bitcoin, but a machine for it, And then we were doing a little footage in there, and then the guy who run the store started screaming at us, "Why are you filming in here?" The producer tried to get a release, and he wasn't having it, so we never could use the footage. But to the customer who reported the filming going on, it looked like someone was filming customers using the ATM, kind of an appropriate place to film. But but it was my first experience like out in any kind of store, like 18 years. So it was surreal to begin with all the selection, but then to see a Bitcoin machine, I'm like, what does that even do? And then the little bit I learned about it, I'm like, wait a minute. So these people are just randomly setting up these things and putting out a Bitcoin. What's stopping the founders from just ripping off everybody's money that's in it and doing it? I think there's a woman who's on the run right now for doing that in Europe, one of the Eastern European countries. She stole like billions of dollars in Bitcoin. And then there's another big case recently, Sam Bankman-Fried or something.
Yeah, I think if it's, I mean, honestly, I'm not an IT person, but I think if it's hackable, it's doable, unfortunately. And it's scary. And being a veteran, and, I'm one of those people that about 10 years ago got told that I was hacked by China because of my identity was taken. And, like the government, like, got me an identity theft program, and I still got, identity theft happening anyway. So, so it's already happening, things like that. So you're asking, I think we're kind of already there, unfortunately, that can you delete the zeros on your account? Yeah. If it's hackable, I think somebody can do it, unfortunately. And there are task force that only focus on that as well, because there's now, as there's hundreds, if not thousands, of cryptocurrency and all kinds of instruments that even I'm not aware of, unless somebody probably seized it in my case and I learned about it, that way.
Right. Imagine you're immersed in this and don't know much. And imagine being in, the cave of incarceration for 18 years. I'm like, what does crypto mean? What is Bitcoin?
Yeah.
People are making money on it. Let me see if I can do that. And by the time I made a decision, it was getting stolen all over the place, millions of dollars. I'm like, okay, I guess I stay out of that one. But let's get back to the case. Mr. What was his name again? The pronunciation?
Wanakawati.
Wanakawati.
And
so he over reports his taxes. He says he's making all kinds of money that he's not. And he does that on his IRS filings, I guess, and triggers some red flags that put a target on his back for your investigation.
Yeah. And on top of that, he does a Ponzi scheme to the victims. So it's just kind of unique because, like I said, I've never seen in, I don't know, 17 years, somebody over report that much money on their actual taxes. Like generally they'll do it loosely on like a loan application or something that's kind of informal, something like that. So, so unfortunately he did do a Ponzi scheme too. He had a factory in Northern California that made, I guess, well, this was pre-COVID too. Gloves, like medical gloves, like surgical gloves. Mm-hmm. And, so unfortunately, I think he's one of those people that had a legitimate business but went rogue. And so
once COVID hit, he saw an opportunity for greed.
Yeah, this was even pre-COVID because I think his scam was done like 2014. But we collect on them 20 years from when they're out of prison, and that's so instead of the date of judgment, because then that allows the victims more time to get some money back. And so he had a legitimate business, but somehow he went very wrong. Somewhere he went very wrong. So unfortunately, those are sometimes the hardest ones to avoid not investing with, because you're like they have a real business. I see his factory on his website. He has real products. It's not like he has fake widgets, digital things or something fake, and like you could literally see a real factory. And so unfortunately the ones that are legitimate and then go wrong are the they do exist. Some of them are just 100% fraud and literally have no inventory, nothing. They're front business.
So what's the outcome of his case? Is he in prison? How much time did he get? What was he convicted of?
I think he's still there. I'm trying to look it up really quick. He owed 108 million in restitution. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, and I want to say that was back 2016, 2017. Oh, that was 2015. Oh, he's still in there. Yep, he got 20 years.
Are you finding like houses and cars he bought for people and seizing them back for victims? Is that what you were doing?
Yeah, so we're still within that period where we can do that because he's probably not due. If you go to BOP.gov, you can see when he's going to get out. But so his collection statute, time to collect against him, starts the day he's out of prison, which is publicly available at BOP.gov. And so yes, so we're within that time frame. He's an older gentleman, so he's subject to Treasury offsets. So that means if he has any tax refunds, probably not. Who knows what he has? But if he gets Social Security, from what I understand, you can't normally get federal benefits like Social Security when you're in prison because of your status. But after he's out of prison, if he's still alive, I think he was, how old was he when he went in? He got 20 years. He was 64 in 2015.
Oh, boy.
So assuming he serves about 80% of his sentence, he's going to be in his 80s, when he gets out.
That's even if he survived COVID, because I was there during COVID, the first wave, and people were dying all around us. The prison was locked down, and at that age, you don't know his health. Okay, so let's try to get onto something, either another really exciting case like this, really fascinating how you broke it down, or something that really meant a lot to you, where your heart went out to the victim, some case that's special to you personally.
Okay, I think I have another one for you. This one was actually on Wanakwati was on American Greed show. This one was on American Greed, and this guy's name is Mark Anderson. Anderson with SON, MARK, and he actually did arson, and he was an arsonist sentenced for destroying $100 million of wine, and it was in the Bay Area. He did some insurance fraud, obviously very extreme, high level. And he basically had a business in, Napa Valley area that had about $37 million of wine. And the business would, rent space out to people that wanted to store their wine in special ways, like there's, and I never audited a wine place, but I know that they use special oak barrels to store it, and
climate controls and all that, probably.
Yeah, they have climate control, and they have different, temperature, and if not, then it basically makes the wine, it doesn't store it and make it like it's supposed to be a certain year and a vintage, and all these little stipulations. And so his business, it was an actual business that actually did, store these wines for people, and so on several. And apparently, I guess one day he just wanted to cook up some insurance fraud and said, "Hey, let me light this thing on fire. It's worth about 37 million," and that's what he did. And so unfortunately, there were several victims. Here it says 40 collectors and 90 wineries, and he was arrested for arson in 2007. And I believe he just got released. So this is a little bit older case, but it was on American Greed. I thought it was pretty unique.
So if he's got that much insurance, that's probably on his buildings and his property. The people who have their stuff stored there, he can't collect off what they had in there. They'd have to collect their own insurance, right?
Yeah. So those people that had their wine stored there, 37 million or something. Here it says 100 million of total wine.
How did they prove arson? Because that's sometimes can be tricky. I know forensics these days and fire forensics, and a lot of ATF gets involved with that. How did they prove arson in this case? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I'm kind of trying to scan it really quick right now. It says that, okay.
I could what I'm going to do is add a link to the story about it just in the description.
Oh, wow. He got 27 years. Okay.
Okay.
So it says he pled. Originally he was looking at, he got 15 years. Okay. Okay. And then they talk about bad health. Okay. So anyways, but yeah, I don't remember how they caught him, but yeah, he was ordered a large amount, 70.3 million in restitution. Right. So I just thought that was really unique because, what he did. Yeah, what they normally do is, and I've spoke to the inspectors before. Normally they'll get like the CAL FIRE, inspectors to come in and they do their forensic, work and their labs and, and then the agents, the case agents will come in, FBI or otherwise, and, get their surveillance cameras and, kind of just see where he was and, follow the trail. And I don't know if there was surveillance footage that picked him up or, I'm guessing that a wine facility holding, $100 million worth of wine had some kind of security.
Right.
And they probably caught him on camera, going in or out or, something weird like that. So,
or even surrounding businesses, they'll go to them and try to round up all the surrounding videos for even a mile out. I know that they'll have a perimeter. They'll go in and look for footage.
Yeah, that's right. Especially if they have their own security and, maybe he had to go through a gate or something. And I'm just assuming that's what they did. And because, technology was okay then. This is the early 2000s. It wasn't like the best, but, we still had videos and stuff back then and, alarm systems. So
now with this facial recognition and the camera on every corner, it's very hard to get caught. And all these criminals that are running wild, especially in your state. I mean, people are leaving your state from very affluent areas. They're getting the hell out of California right now. And
yeah, a lot of people are moving out.
I don't want to take one side on politics one way or the other. I think it's pretty clear, that I'm more Republican leaning than anything else. But it seems like, defund the police shouldn't be a thing. It should be higher quality officers, better training, and more non-lethal weapons. Otherwise, you just have pandemonium. How do you like owning a store where, a gang of 20 people decide to go in one day, friends, and they just take everything valuable off the shelves and scare the crap out of your employees and walk out with it? They know the cops are not going to really respond hardcore for something like that. And the people are just going to be put out of business eventually.
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree. Yeah, that's true. And I do agree with that.
Unfortunately, New York City is the same way. Real estate prices are, starting to collapse, all around in these cities. And unfortunately, it looks like a lot of them are Democrat-run cities because even though I was in prison, and I'm not saying, to be tough on crime, overly tough. I was a victim of the overly tough on crime, 85% Truth in Sentencing Act, which Biden put into place. He's the one that called for that when he was congressman or whatever, senator. And he was saying, that everybody at repeat offends and nothing but predators and animals. And they got this 85% sentencing law passed and told the states in 94, if you build additional prisons and change your sentencing laws, we'll give you money to build additional prisons. If you change your amount of time served from like most states for like 60%, 65% of your sentence, if you go match the federal average, which is 85%, we'll give you, billions of dollars in construction money. So the states, everybody jumped on this and then it destroyed lives, mine included. I'm a nonviolent offender who got caught up in these crazy sentencing laws. And I had no hope for a program. I had no hope for a better sentence. I served 85%, and if you didn't work and do everything you were supposed to do, they'd keep you in there for 100% of your sentence. And here I am, a guy who was taking college courses and writing books and helping other people in the prison the whole time, and I still went through hell. But that's a whole nother issue. So, Laura, what else is really important to you that you'd like to discuss about your work, your cases that are important to you, and why you do this, and how does it feel meeting with a victim? Do you have any memorable experiences?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times we freeze accounts and bank accounts and retirement accounts and wages and and sometimes get an innocent spouse that walks in and says, hey, I had nothing to do with their crime. And, I have kids to feed and out of work or whatever. And what can you do? And, then we really work with them. And if it's 100% proceeds from the crime, unfortunately, those fall under asset forfeiture. And the house, even if it's their only house that they own, those are going to get, those have to legally be, executed on. And then because the victims by statute have a right to get paid, victims of the crime. And so unfortunately, if it's illicit gains, in a house, then it is going to be seized. But anything that's, on top of that, like rental properties or jewelry, or, we seized all kinds of crazy things. There's a case in another district where they seize horses because, the criminal, I don't remember her name, but she basically was into horses and she took all of her illicit, Ponzi scheme gains and went and bought 100 horses and they were worth a lot of money. And then so the U.S. Marshals were, going over there seizing horses, which from what I heard was a nightmare to coordinate horses because they say don't seize anything that, poops and eats and all that. And and same thing with boats and airplanes and,
I used to go to sales, to GSA sales, the General Service Administration, would take stuff that was seized, and a lot of the things would be vehicles and boats in South Florida, and they would say it has significant search damage. They found either smuggled goods or dope in them or something. But yeah, I used to attend a lot of the sales where they would seize a lot of those things.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to think. We had a huge case about, some kind of it was a huge fraud. I mean, it was like 100 million, and we auctioned off cars literally with an auction. I think we auctioned off like over 100 luxury vehicles in one day, and we coordinated with contractors and the U.S. Marshals, and we have had marshals in our office, but just it was a huge thing. It made the news. That's a DC Solar case, so that's a really big one. I just remember that one. That one's more recent.
Solar?
Yeah, DC Solar. So that one, that's the one where we did the big car auction, and which is good because then that means we're making money, and then the money eventually will go to the victims. And generally, it's not a quick process because you have to wait for everything to legally and administratively, all of the assets to be basically sold off, and then to also then have DC back in the main justice to basically approve all that, and then it can actually then they cut a check from U.S. Treasury, and then U.S. Treasury pays the clerk of the court, and then 3 or 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years later, maybe unless it's cash, unless we seize cash because it's liquid, and then the victims generally get paid pretty quick, or we get a cash bond that we apply. But so it's kind of like a waiting game. There were cases that I had for 9 or 10 years. I'm like, oh, all the real estate finally sold, 14 properties. I was waiting for the market to get good and to all sell at a good amount. Sometimes they sell at losses, but because they're illegal proceeds, we had them anyway. Or because they're like counterfeit goods. We can't make money on counterfeit goods because counterfeit, but we would take it just because that's, part of the crime, stuff like that.
You have to destroy it after the case, or keep a representative percentage of that and then destroy them.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of cases. I had a few drug cases, but most of mine were white collar or child predators. Few like bank robbers where they, owed the banks money and stuff, but for the most part, the white collars, a lot of child predators, a lot more than.
I wouldn't think a bank robber is worth it. I don't know a lot of bank robbers. I know a few. I used to do it, and I think the average take is like under $7,000, and they're probably getting 10 or 20 years for it. I'm like, unless in the old days, some guys would take over the whole bank and make sure they got everything, and they might get $200,000. But I don't get it why they would do that. Now I have a question. I'd like your opinion on. Case that you see that I've been following in Indiana, Charles Ray Smith. He just pled in federal court in South Bend about 2 weeks ago to, I think, 1 count of wire fraud, reduced from many counts. He's a suspected serial killer. Many victims of his over the years have turned up dead. Every one of them just after he allegedly ripped them off. So this guy, on at least one case where he's recorded admitting to killing Trina McCreary, which was his girlfriend, for turning over a cell phone to the FBI that helped make the current case against him. He may be indicted for her murder, which is murder of a witness. If it's goes federal or state, in this state, it would be a death penalty case. And there's other ones too that they're looking at. So when he pled, we were all shocked. I was able to, with Mary, round up and try to have the victims show some unity, and go to court, unified and support each other. Because I noticed these crime victims, especially financial crimes and fraud, they're very embarrassed that it happened to them. A lot of times their family members don't even know what happened. They lost, $1 million here, 500,000 here. A lot of money was stolen, by this guy. Well, one of the houses that he lives in, the house he lives in now, is a big mansion on the river, and in India, in Elkhart, where I was filming my TV show. So simultaneously me filming the show, I have this guy trying to involve me, first try to rip me off. Okay. He's trying to sell Mary a fake cure for her leukemia at the time. She's in remission, and try to sell us a house he didn't own. And this was something that he was known for. Well, Mary has skills like yours, and she was able to quickly determine He's a fraud. He's done this before. He's been successfully sued for this, And so, anyway, after he saw he wasn't getting anything from me, then with my background, he tried to involve me. He wanted me to bring him victims, from my church. And I just, let him talk, run his mouth all he wanted. But with all this being said, there's one particular victim who doesn't want to be named, who he got, I think it was $1 million from, but they can prove that that money went to buy this house he's living in now. Okay. But as part of the plea, he's being allowed to keep that house. He sold a building and turned over about $318,000 the other day. And that's going to be dispersed between some victims, even though, because they can't prove the wire fraud on a lot of the cases. So, but how come he's being allowed to live in that house? Nobody's really getting a clear answer. Prosecutor's a very, very nice guy. All of us, saw him in the courthouse, really trying to help. He's really sick of this guy, Charles Ray Smith. But the current agent and prosecutor on the case, they're the only ones in 30-something years of this guy doing this type of thing, allegedly, who have been able to really bring him down. But nobody can figure out why he's allowed to keep this gigantic mansion on the river. It's like one of the nicest houses in the entire city. Why would that exception be made? They can link it to one of the victims. It was from that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Basically what can't be captured under the asset forfeiture of, tracing criminal proceeds to the property, which if this victim who is not comfortable with being named and doesn't want to turn in a victim statement to the victim witness unit, and the prosecutor has, evidence showing, and they want to be a named victim in the judgment, basically collected money for, then it's not really formal. So
no, he did. He's one of the named only by initials in the indictment.
Oh, okay.
He is one of them getting back, I think, whatever it is, like $100,000 or something. But he stole close to $1 million, and had him take money out of his retirement and everything, and devastated this man for years. And many other people. He's, and then later on he threatened to kill these people so they wouldn't testify in the current case. And he's recorded making all these death threats. But so nobody can figure out why he's allowed to keep this thing. That's probably one of the most significant assets. He's got luxury cars. He deliberately sets up LLCs that he's been recorded bragging that it's to hide assets from the feds and from his victims. So why can't the LLCs be dissolved? Why can't that house be seized? Nobody can understand this because
they should be under the asset forfeiture. That's something that criminal and the civil or criminal asset forfeiture assistant U.S. attorneys determine. But if it can't be captured under the asset forfeiture statutes on the front end, like pre-indictment and with the plea agreement and all that, on the back end, somebody like me in the restitution unit financial litigation unit can collect on that, because under the MVRA, the Mandatory Victim Restitution Act, MVRA, you can collect pretty much any asset. It doesn't have to be clean, dirty, anything, which I love because, they really souped it up in 1996. So they made the collection statute a lot longer. So instead of the date of judgment, anything I think after 1996, it was the date of release from prison. So we have 20 years of the clock starts ticking when, he's released from prison. So that's a good thing because that gives victims a lot more money. But also, it doesn't have to be criminal proceeds like in forfeiture that we can execute on this house. Generally, if it's his primary residence and it's his only house, you need special approval to execute on it, but it can still be done. And so post-judgment or post-sentence, someone in the financial litigation unit can still take his house. So all of his cash, all of his cars, all that. So you should contact someone, or your victim friend should contact someone in the civil unit, not criminal, that does post-judgment enforcement in taking these assets. They can track them and try to take them pre-judgment if he agrees. It sounds like he might be cooperating if he's doing a plea.
Oh, he definitely is. We already know the FBI put out a press release years ago that he was an informant for them on a murder for hire case. And then what he'll do is he'll rip off victims, then he'll set them up and entrap them and put them in prison for something they didn't do. Like he'll give them a laptop loaded with child porn and then tell the agents to go kick the door in. Hey, the guy's got a laptop with child porn, a week later. So allegedly. So we've heard this happen to a few people. Other people was a murder for hire case. They dropped the murder for hire. The guy was a doctor. So there's one thing after the other. He's putting innocent people in prison while working as an informant and covering up his financial crimes. Well, the agents, of course, they say that, we're operating in good faith when he brought us information. But I can't imagine them. Now he's perjured himself in federal court. At his detention hearing, he lied to the judge repeatedly, and it was brought up the next day in court by the prosecutor. He lied to you because he said he was in bed for 3 years. We have him in video in Florida. We have him in video traveling and walking in Tennessee and Chicago. And, so he's been all over the country.
Yeah. So,
Your Honor, I'm bedridden because I had surgery on my foot. I can't walk anymore. For 3 years, I haven't left my bed.
yeah, this is not a good guy. What they generally do, what I see, is they do a superseding indictment and they add new charges there. Okay, yeah. I've actually seen them do superseding indictments and add new charges because they're still doing the crime when they're out or even when they're in. Yeah. Family members, whoever are helping them, do more bad things.
He's got a daughter that allegedly helps, but she's approached victims and tried to get them to withdraw their statements, and kind of veiled threats going around allegedly, but it's all documented. So he's got an ex that allegedly has helped him with quite a bit of this. She's got a big swirl around her as well. So she's in a profession where certain medicines could be obtained. But all right, so the other question is in the stockbrokers thing. What do you know? Are there a lot of stockbrokers that are corrupt and stealing from seniors? Like I know in Fresno, there's a big corruption racket going on there. I'll even tell you the name of the firm. I'm not going to say much more. I don't want to say much more on here. But Stiefel, allegedly, and they're a big brokerage firm. And the Fresno office, all the people involved there and some of the employees are really connected to organized crime in that town. And a lot of them are living way outside their means. Mm-hmm. What has to be done to really bring attention to this when, they seem to be very tied into law enforcement too, like gigantic donations to law enforcement, for body cam and all this stuff. But yet they're running, allegedly these big criminal enterprise, and senior citizens are losing their assets, turning up dead, fake documents being filed into the probate court on a regular basis. I mean, what the hell needs to be done about something like this? If you know what was going on in some small town where you are, what's to be done about it?
Yeah, that sounds like a federal thing. And if you suspect that, if you call the local FBI office that they're involved, obviously don't call that district. Call a different office, maybe even out of state. And the FBI actually has, I think, some kind of 1-800 number on their website where you can report crimes and all that. Yep. I've seen people actually write letters to us at the U.S. Attorney's Office, personal letters, drop them off in person. Literally, dear U.S. Attorney, whoever, so I have this information. Call me.
Right. Some of the victims have already done stuff like that. I think they were told like the FBI will triage the case or the matter they're reporting. I remember severity, obviously terrorism and violent crimes and child crimes.
Yeah, like up
and
there.
Then, so it's triaged, right? And not only that, the suspicion that some of the main players are also working as federal informants while simultaneously ripping off people through the probate court and co-opting the courts out in that town. So it's just really tough. I see your point. If these victims reported it to an outside agency, then it comes from not just the victim where they could probably suppress it, but now it's coming from somewhere else. And they're going to ask for an answer down the line, whatever happened with that case.
That's what I would do. I mean, because like California Eastern District, our main office is in Sacramento and Fresno. Maybe if you reported it there, you heard nothing in 3 years, maybe you should go to a different district. I'm just saying.
It didn't happen to me directly, but it happened to, people that are very close to me. And so it's just disgraceful. They got away with stealing millions of dollars, and it's an ongoing thing. They're doing to other people. Other people, who complained about it got locked up and put in prison on fake charges. And so, Laura, listen, we're going to wrap this up. It was a great interview. And if you have anything else you'd like to share, take much time as you'd like to. Anything you'd like to promote about your work today, or your feelings about helping victims and holding people accountable, and maybe how you feel about me getting out of prison. And now I'm not on the other side, but I am a normal human being again. I'm trying to be compassionate and help people. And I think my experiences give me a unique insight into the criminal mindset. Also, I was a law clerk when I was in prison, so I also know the games, that are played. A guy in prison will say, "Hey, New York," my nickname was New York. "Hey, help me with my case. I got to go back to court. My lawyer this." Or I cooperated and they screwed me and I didn't get the deal. This is like gang leaders telling me, "You can't tell nobody because they don't know." But I gave up a body that my homeboy killed somebody out of state, and and I didn't get the deal I was promised. How do I hold them accountable to bring me back to court? And so these are guys that are running around like thugs in the prison, running other members, yet they're cooperating in different agencies, and the younger guys don't even realize it. And God forbid I should mention it on the compound. They had me killed because nobody would want to believe you when you say that. So, you know, it's just I have bring a very unique insight to this and how they are. And a lot of guys will say, help me with my case. They'll tell you their version, and then you read the police reports. You'd like to believe that, but we also know there's a lot of corruption out there. We see the case where they just beat a guy to death again in Memphis, you know, and there's a lot of corruption. I was beaten by police one time, and there was no cameras around. They broke 3 of my ribs while I was handcuffed. They had me on the ground, grabbed the cuffs, positional asphyxia. The guy's got his knee in my back, and I pulled over for the officer. I didn't run or anything, and I still got beat up. And then the big bodybuilder steroid dude, he went and hit me in the back and broke my ribs, and you know, off for a car stop. That's all it was over. Almost cracking my friend's windshield. I was driving his vehicle. It wasn't for all any things I was actually doing, you know. But
that's a shame. Yeah, that's a shame. I know that happens a lot, and I suspect that bribery and cash between, you know, law enforcement and whoever. And we had a case out of Fresno where I don't remember the name, but a detective was actually taking drugs and money and using it and reselling it and doing things like that, kind of like the Training Day movie.
right.
And then we also had a very recent case. I don't remember which prison, but somewhere in our district where the prison guard actually was beating up inmates that were handcuffed and didn't do anything wrong. And, you know, he's going to prison now, and he actually killed one of them and got caught beating, I think, on videotape, you know, and the inmate didn't do anything wrong. And
You know
I
what
think he
sucks?
got 7 to 9 years or something. But yeah, one inmate was actually killed and got dropped on his head and beat. And the prosecutor that prosecuted him was actually crying over this when she told me and was talking about this case. So, you know,
You know what really sucks about that? That's the ones you hear about because you're behind the scenes. You're in, you know, law enforcement community. Me experiencing it one time firsthand, a second time in New York, but it wasn't as bad. I was running and the guy threw a blackjack at me. I'm a fleeing person for nothing. He said, come here. And I didn't want to talk to him. I ran and he threw his blackjack at me and nearly broke my back with it. It was lead inside of it back in the day in the 70s. I was just a kid. I got away, but you know, he threw a blackjack at me. And then I went back to that alleyway, you know, a few hours later, the blackjack he couldn't find it in the dark. So I actually got it. But yeah, it's just you guys hear about him and prosecute him and feel bad. But I guarantee you, if you looked into the record of that officer, there was a history of inmates
No,
reporting.
there was a history. Yeah, there was like several people by the time before it got to that point. Someone died. You know,
And nobody listens to us, man. When we're in prison, nobody listens. You know, because you probably guys get a million letters from prisoners, and you probably think half of them are crazy or lying or trying to make a deal.
Yeah, I
But
got phone calls from them too before. Yep, and and I also talked to their case managers too, and took their money if they had money, which most of them don't in there. But yeah,
right, but if they're reporting like violent crimes, man, you know, I would say if they reach out to you again, man, listen to them. Try to get the right person because sometimes even the investigators in the prison, you're reporting their uncle or their cousin, and the investigator is the investigator of the prison, so they're not going to take it serious. As a matter of fact, if guys report stuff like that, usually they'll get retaliated or get it worse, or they'll get locked up for their protection and transferred or something. You know,
yeah,
they will never deal with the abusive officers. I've almost never seen it
they'll
unless
get
somebody
swept
ends up
under the
dead.
rug.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
so
I suspected that because I've talked with a few of those BOP officers because I just wanted to know what it was like, you know, and talked to a few of them offline, and I'm like, you know, and they said some pretty horrific things like what you're describing. So none of that surprises me. So unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me.
yeah. There was a guy, real quick. He was in for life. He had his friends arranged to help his prison escape. He went to a dentist, an outside dentist in Florida. I believe it was the 80s. Alvarez, I forget the first name. He goes there. Everybody knew his friends, family knew he was going to be there. So his friends pulled guns on the corrections officer, give me the keys, and they were going to take the prisoner with them, right? And the guy, the guard, transporting him, you know, he's got the waist chain and everything on him, the black box and all that, threw the van keys and the cuff, whatever else he had, in the bushes, like real far away. This guy's friend got pissed off and killed that officer, and they still got away with Alvarez. Well, he gets captured, goes back to prison. Now he ends up like on death row because he's part of an escape that somebody died, right? An officer died.
Mm-hmm.
He was on death row and he was reporting constantly how he was being abused and beaten up all the time by the officer, you know, revenge and whatever, like emotional stuff, you know. And I can't pretend to know what I would do under those circumstances, especially with family that got killed. You know, you can't speak unless you're in those shoes. But this is what they call a triangle in Florida. There's three major prisons, including death row. There's Union, Rayford, and I forget the name of the other one, but they're right in this one town, Stark.
Mhm.
And Stark is like a hub for what used to be for highly abusive, murderous officers, and they all have family members working in the courts. They're related to the judges, the prosecutors. So none of them were ever held accountable for years. Finally, Alvarez turns up dead in his cell. They autopsy the body. He's got, I think it was every bone in his body broken, and he's got
Mhm.
clear boot prints all over him. So they went in there one day, beat him to death with their boots. The officers did, and for years they were saying that he hung himself, and the injuries were from them cutting him down. The coroner had, I think, leave town. I forget how bad it got. They finally put them in state court trial for murdering this prisoner. The local jury in Stark, guess what they did? Acquitted him.
Yeah.
The FBI stepped in, and now they all turned on each other, and they're in prison for murdering this inmate. So it gets really, really treacherous in prison, depending on what you're involved with and who you piss off and all that stuff. You really just got to mind your business and hope to get out of there alive. Because they were shooting at gang members once, and I ended up with blood all over me. And I said, holy shit, I got shot. And it turned out that when we were supposed to lay down, when they started shooting at these guys that were fighting, these gang members, this rubber bullets, shotguns, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't even supposed to be in a Supermax, but I escaped from prison. I was on, America's Most Wanted. I was a high escape risk. So I'm in a Supermax, but I was misclassified. I had not the right points to be there. And I fought that battle for 2 years. Nobody gave a crap that I was in the wrong type of facility. But anyway, so I ran to the cell rather than laying down, because I wasn't trying to be out there and get shot. And the attack dogs come in and start biting on people. So I get in my cell. I'm covered in blood. And I told my son, I knew I was going to get shot if I didn't get out of this damn prison. And he says, man, you didn't get shot. He says, you ran in the cell and bumped your head on my shelf for my TV. So my forehead was split open. I thought I had got a ricochet or something. Listen, we're going to wrap this up. Anything else I'd like to share with my fans?
No, I'm happy to be on, and I look forward to hearing from you again, and then hopefully you have more books or another show in the works.
I do. I have starting a local TV show. It's called Steal the Spotlight at a radio station. Steal the Spotlight. You'll play on my last name, and actually a public relations firm called Steal the Spotlight. So we're doing the branding across all things, and we're trying to get this going. But I really appreciate your support. You've been an early fan. You have very similar skills to my fiance Mary, so you guys have a lot in common. And she's standing by, helping me set this thing up. So it's good to see you. And we will have all these links in the description. Everybody, please hit like and subscribe. Follow Laura across her social media, and especially, what's your name of your YouTube channel?
Laura Leone, Starseed Metaphysical Shop.
Okay, so check that out. I'll put a link in there for you at least. I don't know much about that side of your life, but anyway, she's good at going after the victims and chasing down money trails, just like my beautiful fiance. Thank you for being on the show. We appreciate it. Have a good night. Thank you, Laura.
You too. Have a good night. Bye.
This is William Steele. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your support. Please remember, hit the like and subscribe button now.